Good morning, everybody. Good morning to everyone in the chamber, and good morning to those joining us through our digital gallery for the first meeting of 2021. It's my privilege to declare the ordinary meeting of the 19th of January open. In doing so, I'd firstly acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, and also the lands that form the footprint of our great region, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and continue to congratulate them on their nurture of their culture. Also make a notation that there were no questions on notice for public question time, which would now precede the meeting, so that didn't occur this morning. Note of full attendance of councillors and the executive team, and welcome you back to the excitement of 2021, which I'm sure will be very different to 2020, but nonetheless will require us to ensure we are at our diligent best. On that basis, I believe there are no apologies for the meeting today, and it is timely then for us to turn our attention to prayers. We are not able to be joined this morning by one of our local ministers, so please bear with me, councillors, as I look at some words from Proverbs chapter 3, which reminds us to trust in the Lord with all our heart. Do not lean on our own understanding. In all our ways to acknowledge him, and he will make straight our paths. As we enter into 2021, that's a timely reminder that our personal interest is secondary to the calling at this table, and also to the wisdom that's far greater than ours. If we just pause for a moment in prayer. And Father, indeed, as we enter the opportunities of 2021, we acknowledge that the best that is possible will only be under your guidance, under your wisdom and understanding, that our personal desires, our personal perspectives are secondary and meaningless by compared with that wisdom. Help us at this table to be thoughtful, attentive, listening, and enduring to the long-term good of the people of this region. That is our calling and our commitment. We ask for your continued guidance and your oversight upon this meeting today. In the name of Jesus, amen. Councillors, I turn to item 5 of the agenda before us and ask, are there any declarations of interest by members relating to matters before the meeting today? I'll take silence to indicate no declarations. Then turn to the reminder at item 6, just to ensure the maintenance of accuracy in our registers of interest. There are no announcements for the meeting today that I've been notified of, and there are no deputations for the meeting today that I've been notified of. So we move to item 9, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, you've had access to those for some time now. So just scroll through so I get to the right place for that. And there is a recommendation on the screen that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 14th of December 2020 be adopted. Would someone wish to move that? Councillor Enright, sorry.
So I was just going to have a question in relation to the minutes.
So is there any additional, so we have the recommendation, or we have a mover, so further information request, councillor?
Look, it's only a minor thing, Mr Mayor, but page 183 of the minutes, I think, is upside down. and just needs flicking the other way. It's just a minor thing, but I just discovered it last night when I was reading it.
But the content's accurate?
Well, I think, yeah, the content's accurate.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. And I just had another point of clarification too, and a question to the CEO. Mr. Mayor?
Mm-hmm. Continue.
In relation to item 5, declaration of interest by members. Just reading the legislation last night, I was just wondering, when a declaration of interest is made to the CEO, is that officially made to the CEO and needs to be recorded in the minutes as already declared, or do we have to wait for a meeting before we declare that declaration of interests?
Sorry, Councillor, I'm very happy. Are you disputing the content of the minutes? Are we dealing with the contents of the minutes, or are you asking about a procedural matter?
No, I'm asking about, it just has implications for item number 5, Mr. Mayor, as to when a conflict of interest is declared or not. And with item number 5, Councillor McGuinness advised he had a conflict of interest in the meeting, which is clear. But other provisions of the Act, and I know they're new provisions, hard to fathom some of them, but if a declaration of interest was made before the meeting, in accordance with the Act, it seems like a declaration of interest can be made to the CEO at any time, doesn't have to be in a meeting. Would that be correct?
That is correct.
My understanding, Mayor and Councillor, thank you for the question, is that the councillors, in previewing an agenda that's released, 4 or 5 days prior to a meeting, have sufficient time to identify if there's any matters there that they may have a conflict for, and that provides them time to notify the CEO. I don't believe that precludes a councillor from raising that declaration at any time prior to that item.
Okay, so in relation to this item number 5, in the previous minutes, are you happy with the procedure that was adopted for consideration of that matter?
I think you would need to provide me some more detail for me to respond to a question like that, Councillor.
Look, I've had questions from the public who've listened to the tape recording on this particular matter, and it seems that under the legislation, if you have a conflict of interest, then you are deemed to be a conflicted person. In the case of Councillor McGuinness, he declared, after that matter was considered, but clearly he was a conflicted person, and probably, in hindsight now, shouldn't have participated in the consideration of whether the Mayor had a conflict of interest, because he was a conflicted person for the same reason. And of course,
Councillor, you've moved off the original question. You're now moving into a vague debate of another matter. Your first question was, if a declaration was made to the CEO, should the CEO enter that into the minutes? I don't believe that's a requirement of legislation from my read of the legislation. So that's the clarification to that question. You now seem to have moved vaguely into another matter, which is difficult to understand. So can you ask the question for information? And I believe you've asked the question, and the CEO has said, if you can't provide additional information, he can't provide an answer. So what is the question that you're now seeking to address?
All right, I'll try and make it more simple, Mr. Mayor. At 9:13 a.m, Greg Christensen returned to the meeting and resumed the chair. And then it says, Councillor Duncan McGuinness advised Council that he has a declarable conflict of interest. Now, my question was, if the CEO knew that beforehand, was it appropriate that it be declared at that point in time, or should it have been declared at the beginning of item number 5, which would have precluded him from taking the chair and exercising a casting vote in relation to this consideration.
My understanding in that matter, Councillor, is that each councillor goes through their processes of declaration one by one, and in this situation it started with the Mayor's declaration, then the Deputy Mayor's declaration. I think you're asking whether multiple councillors would need to leave the chamber for those matters to be dealt with. That's not the correct way of dealing with these matters. Otherwise, you could have a situation where, you know, more than a quorum or more than half of the councillors are out of the room, and then there's not an ability to manage the declarations of the other councillors.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, but the new legislation does provide for that process when there isn't a quorum on how it should be dealt with.
Councillor, I believe if there's a matter, it's disappointing that, again, perhaps the CEO, if you'd raised the questions when you've had time you've had the minutes for quite some time, it's disappointing that perhaps you didn't raise this to the CEO. I believe you're now moving into a place where CEO's provided an answer and you're now moving into argument of that answer. That's not appropriate to be debating it. The CEO's provided an answer, and you have to accept that answer in good faith. You can't go on to continue to debate it. We're discussing whether the minutes, just be clear, whether the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting that occurred. If you want to have a debate about whether a process in that meeting was proper, there's a different process for that to occur. But we're not debating whether or not this was this is about, was this an accurate record of the meeting? That's what the motion that we're seeking to confirm the minutes. Whether, if you believe there was a procedural error, there's a different place to deal with that. You can't rewrite the minutes on that basis. So please, I'm going to ask you to curtail this unless you believe there is something inaccurate in the record of the minutes. Then I'm going to ask you to withdraw this matter, and you can bring it forward at another time because you're discussing a different issue to whether or not the minutes are accurate.
Mr. Miller, the CEO answered my question and I was happy with his answer.
So Councillor, we're dealing with, thank you for that clarification. I'm glad you're happy with his answer. Do you have any other questions pertaining to the accuracy of the minutes of the last meeting?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Right,
I'll be voting in favour of the acceptance of those minutes as they are.
Councillor, I just thanks for the answer. We seek a seconder. Are there any other seeking information pertaining to the minutes of the last meeting? If not, we seek a seconder. So Michael moved.
Yes, I'm happy to second.
Seconded Councillor West. Wishing to speak to the matter? Anyone wishing to speak against? If not, we have a motion before us now that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 14th of December 2020 be adopted. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move now to the next item on our agenda, which is there is no business arising from the previous minutes before us today. So we come to item 11, the business of the meeting before us today. Come to item 11.1, CEO. Do you plan to introduce this, or I believe yes?
I'll speak to that
Thank you.
item, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, councillors, executive officers and members of the public listening at home, and welcome to 2021. Item 11.1 this morning is relating to the potential establishment of a Police Citizens Youth Club in Beaudesert. I'm sure that councillors have read the report as presented. Perhaps just in summary, the Beaudesert Chamber of Commerce established a steering committee to investigate the establishment of a PCYC for the Scenic Rim located in Beaudesert, and held a public meeting on the 18th of November 2020 in the centre attended by a number of community representatives. The Mayor spoke and a number of councillors were also present. After that public meeting, the Mayor and myself met with Kel Clark, who's the CEO of PCYC in Queensland, David Kasolki and John Powell from the Steering Committee of the Chamber of Commerce, to develop an understanding of the way forward. And as part of that meeting, it was requested that Council provide the PCYC Queensland with a letter expressing in principle support for the concept of a PCYC in Beaudesert. The purpose of this report is for Council to confirm its willingness to send such a letter to the board of the Police Citizens Youth Clubs Queensland PCYC.
Thank you, CEO. There's a fair bit in the report. Are there any points of clarification, councillors, to this report? Questions that you'd like to expand on? Whilst you're considering that, I would observe, CEO, if for clarity in the report, the understanding is that I read from the report, is it a correct understanding that the decision about whether to proceed with the PCYC is actually a PCYC decision, not a council decision? So whilst we're today considering about putting a letter of support, there is a process that the PCYC will go through to determine whether they will then proceed with this. It is not a council decision point. Would that be a correct understanding?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. The PCYC is an independent organisation that undertake their own independent assessments of requests that they receive for the establishment of a PCYC in a community. This is part of their process to trigger a process where they undertake that assessment phase. That phase can be anywhere from 6 months to 18 months is our understanding, where they would identify support in the community, understand the financials of developing such a PCYC facility, looking at appropriate or suitable locations within the community. Council triggers that by offering this letter of in principle support.
Thank you. Question for points for clarification?
Yeah, it's a question, yeah. To Councillor Enright, I believe that James Robinson, the developer of the Oaklands estate, has made available land for this project. Read it in the newspaper, but is that correct or not?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Swanborough. I think that's probably a question you have to ask the steering committee of the PCYC.
Any other points of clarification to the report pertaining to the recommendation before us today rather than other issues? If not, CEO, I'll ask you to read the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that Council provide an in-principle letter of support to the Board of the Police Citizens Youth Clubs Queensland, in brackets PCYC, for the establishment of a PCYC facility in Beaudesert, to enable the Board to commission a report on the viability, suitability and sustainability of establishing such a facility.
Seek a mover. Councillor Enright, seconded. Before we move to seconder, any other information for this item? The information requests?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment to the motion.
Sorry, Councillor, do you have any information requests? You can't move an amendment, so you're out of order at the moment. Do you have any information questions to the item? No. Now we can have a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Now, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think it's terrific. I think Beaudesert definitely needs one of these facilities. And
sorry, Councillor, can you just get to what's your proposed?
My proposed amendment to the motion is that Council send a letter of thanks to James Robinson for making available and possible this project for the people of Beaudesert.
Do we have a proposed amendment for a, I'm not quite sure whether it's a relevant to the item before us, Councillor. I'm not sure it's an amendment that is fitting to this item. So again, you've tabled an amendment. Does anyone wish to second that amendment?
Mayor, could I just ask Councillor Swanborough, is it those words to be added to the recommendation?
Yeah, point 2.
Yeah, it just wasn't clear there. So it's another point, keeping the recommendation that's there and
Yes,
another recommendation.
that's correct, Councillor.
Another point.
May I ask?
Sorry, I still don't have a. So do you want information about the amendment?
Yes.
Before we get a seconder?
Perhaps a question to Councillor Swanborough. At this stage of the process, what relevance is Council's response to a proposed offer of land when this is really about the PCYC organisation looking at the viability? I just don't understand the relevance to your amendment.
Well, can I reply?
Well, you've been asked for the information, Councillor.
Yeah. Look, I think it is relevant because, without land, you've got no opportunity to do a feasibility study. You have no opportunity to make a submission to PCYC Queensland and about this particular issue. And if you are looking at the feasibility and there is land available for this, then it makes it so much easier to realise this particular project. And, I think it's a pretty magnanimous gesture on behalf of the developer to make available that land to the community to make it happen. I just think, council needs to provide the leadership and encouragement and thanks to a person for making such a generous donation.
Sorry. So now, if there's no other points for information, do we have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it, Mayor, just to have it debated.
Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Swanborough, you wish to speak to your amendment any further than what you have?
Oh, no, I think I've explained it pretty well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone wishing to speak against the amendment? Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really to mention that, I appreciate Councillor Swanborough's amendment, but it's still very early days at this stage, and we're really not at that stage. This is just an in-principle support letter to PCYC just to start things going.
Anyone else wishing to speak in support of the amendment? Anyone else wishing to speak to the amendment? I certainly would like to speak to the amendment. I don't support the amendment, simply that part of the evaluation that PCYC have indicated they would do is what's an appropriate location. It was well articulated, has been well articulated previously that council has secured land footprints for a range of future needs, and that what's the appropriate location for a PCYC is not dependent on who might offer a footprint of land which, because it's not been offered to council, I have no idea whether it's suitable, appropriate or satisfactory. So until PCYC complete the assessment of what they believe is appropriate as a facility, or if it's appropriate and what would be a best location, having availability of land is, whilst it might be an interesting gesture, it has no relevance to the consideration of PCYC from the discussion that I was part of with their CEO. It plays no part in their analysis at this point in time. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? As no one indicated they wanted to speak for anyone else wishing to speak? Councillor McConnell.
Yeah, I just probably have to agree there. After meeting and being part of the steering committee with Councillor Enright, with both John Powell and David Gazolke, and meeting initially with PCYC, it's very early to put land available that may not be in the best location, may not be the right size. I just think it's a bit too early to be sending letters of thanks, which would then seem to indicate that that land that has been accepted. So I won't be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the amendment? Wish to close discussion of your amendment, Councillor?
Look, thank you, Mr Mayor. That may be the case. I've listened to councillors talk against it. I understand what they're saying, but regardless of whether that land is used or not, I think it's just a very positive thing that we have a local developer who's prepared to, put an offer like this on the table. And I suppose whether it's, thanking him for the land or thanking him for his offer of the land, either way, I just think it's a very good thing. And the council should encourage more people to do that sort of thing in the community, and we'll all be better off. Thank you.
Okay, we put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? The amendment is defeated. Division called by Councillor Swamborough. Those in favour of the amendment, Division 1. Those against the amendment, Divisions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and the Mayor. We return to the original motion and it remains unamended, and therefore now, Councillor Enright, do you wish to speak to this as the mover?
Thank you, Mayor. I would. I believe this is the appropriate way forward in offering a, in principle, letter of support. And I would like to just commend the efforts of the Bethesda Chamber of Commerce President David Kosolki and the Chamber Steering Committee Chair John Powell for the energy and enthusiasm to bring this proposed project to this stage. It is appropriate that this project be driven by the community and with the expertise and guidance of the board of the PCYC Queensland. And I think this in principle letter of support from council is just one more step in this process.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone else wishing to speak in support of the motion? If not, we'll put the motion as tabled. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 11.2 and we turn to the GM.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors, executive and those listening online. It's with great pleasure this morning that we present a win that council has achieved in the National Resilient Australia Awards that were held in Canberra in December, whereby we received a highly commended in the local government category. This award was on the back of having won the local government category award jointly in the Queensland Resilient Awards and for the initiative of Scenic Rim Farm Box. As council will recall, the development of Scenic Rim Farm Box was an initiative from the Scenic Rim Economic Stimulus Package COVID-19, whereby council aimed to establish a Scenic Rim providor sales, logistics and delivery solution for the region on the back of having to cancel Eat Local Week and the Winter Harvest Festival, which are critical events in this region. So it is an excellent recognition of everybody that has been involved in establishing Scenic Rim Farm Box, not least of all the vision provided by council by establishing the economic stimulus package in the first place. So it's with great pleasure today that we hand over the certificate that was received in Canberra by our officer Brenda Walker, who is also one of the team leading the Scenic Rim Farm Box initiative. Along with the Scenic Rim Farm Box organisation that has been now established. The report speaks to the current status of how that initiative is travelling, and I think it is a great accolade for the council for its vision and for the local producers and growers that have embraced this initiative, and of course for everybody in the surrounding areas of Brisbane, Gold Coast, Redlands, Ipswich, and the Scenic Rim that have embraced the Scenic Rim Farm Box and have made it the success that it is today. I just want to acknowledge in the report the City of Hobart for their win in this category for their initiative Resilient Hobart, and the Shire of Bruce Rock for their initiative. They were a joint highly commended with Scenic Rim. Mayor, in putting the recommendation today, I'd like to consider a slight amendment to section 2 of the recommendation. There's a word missing. 2 should read commend the council and officers, so to add the word and involved, and the team at Scenic Rim Farm Box for the initiative and for its success on the national stage. So it's with great pride that we present the certificate to council today.
Thank you. Councillors, there's a fair bit in the report there. Any questions for clarification to the GM? It's certainly, as a general comment, it's encouraging to gain that recognition for dealing with difficult circumstance in a difficult year, and it wasn't without a lot of challenges, both for the officers involved as well as our producers and for those involved with the establishment of the new capacity. So it is a small reward for what were very hard efforts. Councillors, if there are no other points of clarification, I ask you to introduce the recommendation, GM, and we'll seek a mover.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation today is that Council 1 acknowledge the highly commended award received for the Scenic Rim Farm Box in the local government category at the Resilient Australia Awards, and 2, commend the council and officers involved and the team at Scenic Rim Farm Box for the initiative and its success on the national stage.
Seek a mover. Councillor McConnell, any other requests for information? If not, we'll seek a seconder. Councillor West, wish to speak? Councillor McConnell?
No, thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone else wishing to speak to? Councillor West.
If I may quickly, look, as has already been mentioned, I just want to commend everybody involved in this project. It did happen very quickly and in difficult circumstances. And what I believe is really pleasing is that the team at Scenic Rim Farm Box for 2021 are really looking to greater heights for this year and already on that road. So congratulations to them all.
Thank you. Councillor McConnell, did you wish to close? Anyone else? Sorry, anyone else wish to speak? Sorry. Then we have a motion before us, councillors. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 11.3. And again, we're in your hands, Jan.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an update that we've been providing to Council on the activities of the Northern Rivers Joint Organisation Board meetings, and this report covers the meetings that were held in 2020. I want to acknowledge Councillor Swanborough, who was appointed as Council's representative in May of this year, and also Councillor West, who was the previous representative on the Northern Rivers Joint Organisation. So there's a suite of minutes of the various meetings that have been held throughout 2020, and just noting that the minutes for November, the last meeting of the year, are currently in draft, and as is the case at the next meeting, they'll be ratified. I think the report is reasonably self-explanatory, and perhaps Mayor ask if Councillor Swanborough, as the representative of the NRJO, have anything he wished to add to the report.
Councillor, anything to add to that report? Sorry, you have to turn.
Sorry, no, Mayor, not at this stage, no.
Any questions for clarification to the GM for the report? Okay, then we'll get you to introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation today is that Council 1 acknowledge the Northern Rivers Joint Organisation Ordinary Board meeting minutes for the meetings held in February, June, August, September and November 2020 which is draft. And 2, council acknowledge the activities and initiatives being undertaken by the Northern Rivers Joint Organisation as they pertain to the Scenic Rim region.
Okay, seek a mover. Councillor Swanborough move. Any questions, any additional information requested, councillors? Not, seek a seconder.
A second, Mayor.
Councillor West. Councillor Swanborough, you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I just want to say that this group of people who meet are very capable and very organised and very motivated to do well for their respective regions in the northern New South Wales, and it's been a pleasure of mine to be involved in that process. They certainly are very interested in what their neighbour, the Scenic Rim Council, is doing. They read the reports in some detail, I note, and I'm always given lots of questions about it when I go there. So, yeah, I just want to say I think it's an organisation worth supporting, and I hope that there can be mutual benefits coming from our representation on that particular group. And yeah, I commend the recommendation.
Anyone else wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just want to mention too, this has been a very useful alliance that we've had over the years, and certainly we do share quite a few commonalities, and I think one of the things, the most important commonalities that need to be mentioned is the major transport route that we share of the Mount Lindesay Highway, which is very important, and so we all do need to be conversing on that. Also, there is the Lions Road, which has is another very important route, but perhaps not so the heavy traffic route, so it's important that we maintain this alliance.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to seek to speak? If not, Councillor, do you wish to add anything to close? Okay, we put the motion. Those in favour of the motion as per the two-part motion, those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 11.4, page 46 of your reports. And again, we're in your hands, Jim.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. This is a request for a waiver of infrastructure charges for Bow Desert RSL sub-branch, and we have in chambers with us today the Manager of Planning and Development, Mark Lohman. So with the will of the meeting, I'd ask Mark if he'd like to speak to this report to provide an overview to councillors.
Thank you, GM, and welcome. Good morning, council. The Bow Desert sub-branch has requested that council waive infrastructure charges in relation to a 1 into 2 subdivision in their property at Bow Desert. The sub-branch itself is a community-based organisation. It conducts thousands of hours of community work, both for veterans and generally in the community. The request is considered reasonable against the general policies that council have on the waiving of infrastructure charges, and the request is supported. You'll also note in recommendation 3 that we advised QU of our waiver. QU will also issue an infrastructure charge notice of the similar amount, and so advising them that we've waived our infrastructure charge might hopefully also encourage them to do the same.
Okay, councillors, any a fair bit there in the report, any questions for clarification to the report? If not, we'll ask you to introduce the 3 parts in the recommendation. Will that be you, GM? Thank you.
The recommendation to council today is that council 1 agree to waive infrastructure charges associated with RAL 19/028, and 2, council's decision be given effect via an infrastructure agreement, and 3, that urban utilities be advised accordingly of council's actions.
Thank you. I seek a mover, Councillor Enright. Any further information requested pertaining to this item, councillors? If not, we seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell, you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Enright?
Thank you, Mayor. I fully support this recommendation. In my view, it's an appropriate use of the intent of council policy in relation to the adopted infrastructure charges resolution by a case-by-case assessment for waiver of infrastructure charges for a not-for-profit organisation. The Bethesda RSL sub-branch is a true non-for-profit organisation whose purpose is to provide support for our war veterans and their families. This organisation is run almost entirely by volunteers, and by that I mean that in the last year, over 50 volunteers provided over 7,200 hours of service to over 1,100 clients. The only paid staff is one full-time and one part-time administration staff. Importantly, there are no additional demands for infrastructure as a result of this development approval. The waiving of these infrastructure charges will assist this truly not-for-profit organisation to continue the vital service to our war veterans and their families.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion in 3 parts as tabled. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 11.5, page 61 of your agendas, councillors. Again, GM.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a request for endorsement of the planning assumptions in the draft Urban Utilities Water Net Safe Plan. Again, the Manager of Planning, Mark Lohman, is here with us, and I'd ask Mark if he would just provide a brief overview related to this item.
Thank you, GM. The request is a procedural matter where Urban Utilities prepare their net serve plan. So it's the equivalent of Council's local government infrastructure plan, and what they are seeking to ensure is that the underlying data that is used in both remains consistent. So as part of their process, Urban Utilities request of Council to confirm that the data they are using is consistent with what we have used to create our LGIP, and to formally confirm that. At a later stage, they'll actually release the net serve plan for community and council consultation, but at this stage, it's really just the underlying data they're seeking council's comment on. So our officers have reviewed that data. It is consistent with our LGIP, and we're recommending that we advise them accordingly.
Questions for clarification to the report?
Yes, just one question. The data that we use for that, is that which census are we referring to, or is there updated information from the census since then that we're using in this these assumptions?
The assumptions relate back to the 2016 census. So there should be another one due this year, in which case we'll have an opportunity to update on better data.
Any other questions for clarification to the report? If not, I'll ask you to introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is that Council endorse the amended draft Urban Utilities Water Net Safe Plan 2020 as being consistent with the planning assumptions identified in the current Scenic Rim planning scheme pursuant to section 99BR1CI of the South East Queensland Water Distribution and Retail Restructuring Act 2009.
Seek a mover to this item. Councillor Chalk. Any requests for information? Additionally, otherwise I'll seek a seconder. Councillor McGuinness. Thank you. Councillor Chalk, wish to speak? Anyone seeking leave to speak against the motion? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally to the motion? If not, we'll put the motion as tabled. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We now move to the GM Asset and Environmental Sustainability for item 11.6. Thank you, GM.
Thank you, Mayor, Councillors, Executive and those listening in online. 11.6 deals with the petition with regard to a speed bump on Christie Street, Canungra. It's a fairly brief report. In there you'll acknowledge, well, it is acknowledged that the speed hump was actually installed by the Department of Transport and Main Roads on Christie Street, being a Department of Transport and Main Roads street. I also would like to draw your attention to the fact of the actual name of the crossing being a raised flat crossing as a wombat crossing, for those who are interested in those sorts of things. So basically, as outlined in the report, as the crossing was installed by the department on a department road, that we actually refer within the recommendation to the petitioner that they converse with the department, as it's their responsibility.
Thank you, GM. Any questions for clarification to this item, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question to the General Manager. As councillors, I don't know about the other councillors, but I imagine it's the same. I get a lot of requests for council to do work.
Can you ask your question rather than, if you want to lobby something, can you just ask your question rather than generalising, please?
Yeah. Well, I was about to ask the question. Councillors get a lot of requests similar to this for work on main roads. What is the relationship between council and main roads in relation to these sort of issues? Should it be that we educate the public that if it's on a main road, they go straight to the main roads department? Or does council have some sort of advocacy position with main roads where we can also intervene and put our views forward for them to influence, what their final result is?
That's a very, I could answer that in many and varied ways. We have some obligations under contracts that we have for undertaking maintenance with the department, but that varies across a number of our roads that are state controlled roads. The reality of it is council has any opportunity to either advocate or otherwise for any decision that is made on those roads. However, the responsibility for those decisions lie with the department. So I suggest that each position or application or approach that any councillor gets from someone with regard to a Department of Transport and Main Roads road, they pass on through their councillor support officers. Also, at the same time, it doesn't hurt for the individual who's actually contacting the councillor to contact the relevant department via their customer contact inquiry points. So realistically, it really depends on the actual issue as it is presented. So I've tried to summarise what could be a half-hour answer into 2 minutes or less, hopefully. So some are smiling to think that they were in for the half-hour version.
Any other points for clarification, Councillor West?
May I make a comment at this stage, please?
Is it in clarification?
No, it's not about, well, it is.
Is it in clarification to this matter?
I'm not sure whether it clarifies it, but it's about this project and how it began, which was kind of in relation to Councillor Swamborough's comment, but I'm happy to keep it to later.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get clarity about what it is that we're addressing. We tend to wander wide, that's all. Any other questions for clarification or comments of clarification to this item? Council, if you believe your comment adds value to the clarity of this matter, then I'm prepared to accept it from a point of view of clarification to this if you believe it's relevant to that.
Thank you, Mayor. I do just want to make the comment that when this project first began, it was much larger. There were in fact 2 wombat crossings proposed for the main street of Canungra, and DTMR and the community did work very well together regarding the project, and the end product was only one of these wombat crossings.
Thanks for that clarification. We have a recommendation. GM, would you introduce the recommendation?
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation reads that Council thank and respond to the petitioner advising that the crossing was installed on a state-controlled road by the Department of Transport and Main Roads, and as such, Council is not in a position to accede to their request.
Seeker mover, Councillor West. Any other questions for additional information on this item, councillors? If not, Seeker seconder, Councillor McConnell. Councillor West, do you wish to speak to this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just also want to thank the petitioners who put forward their views. It has been a little difficult with this crossing. It's new, it's different, it has changed the way people move around the town, but the ultimate goal at the end was for safety and to slow the traffic down, which it has achieved that. And certainly for those who have further concerns, as we've stated, they do need to go and talk to somebody at a state level and Department of Main Roads. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally to the motion? If not, we shall put the motion as tabled. Those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 11.7, page 66 of your report. GM, we're still with you.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 11.7 deals with approach that council has had from a owner of blocks on what is a section of what is affectionately known as the extension of Long Road, the northern section of which council owns a number of blocks that were purchased some years ago for a future linking of this road through to the roundabout on Main Western Road. So the reality of it is, within the report there is an actual error that I need to bring to your attention on the second page of the report, where it actually references an attachment 4 and an attachment 5. Those attachments were removed as a result of reviewing that there was potential private information contained within those attachments, and it wasn't appropriate for those to be actually included within the report. Unfortunately, the amendment for those two paragraphs did not make it through to the report, so I apologise for that. And so the reality of it is, it does not affect the overall intent of the report with regard to those two attachments not being made available. So getting back to the overall body of, or the requirement of why the report is here, is if you actually go to the locality map, there's which is attachment 1, it actually shows that to gain so to be clear, this isn't a development application. These lots actually already exist, and easement to those lots already exist across the land that's owned by council. The exception to that is that there's a small lot on the northern end of this road that actually did not have easement provisions for access. The actual easement provisions for these are on the eastern side of that lot through private property. There is quite a substantial stand of of remnant vegetation in that location, and those that own the block and want to sell these blocks with access via the easement conditions thought it was appropriate to seek council's support or endorsement in actually allowing easement to be generated over that small lot known as, I believe, 1C within that attachment. So the reality of it is, that's the first part of what the report deals with. The second part is around the acknowledgement as the owners of those lots. We need to be supportive of any application the owners need to make with regard to the making of that road, which does involve a application process. If there are any other questions, I have Kartik Van Ketchmerman, who here that may be able to answer any detailed questions if I'm unable to.
So, councillors, there's a fair bit of material in this report. Are there additional questions of clarification to the report? If not, will you introduce the recommendation in its 4 parts, please, GM?
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is that Council, as landowner of Lot 33 on SP 107087, consent to access easements over Lot 33 on SP 107087 in favour of Lot 223 and Lot 224 on SP 112575, Lot 212, Lot 213 and Lot 214 on SP 149168. 2. Council, as landowner, endorse construction of a driveway per driveway detail plan 20-145 SK101 revision A within Lot 33 on SP 107087, Lot 215 on SP 149168 and Lot 220 SP 112575. And 3, Council, as landowner of Lot 33 on SP 107087, Lot 215 on SP 149168 and Lot 220 SP 112575 consent to the lodgement of a development application for access easement over Lot 33 on SP 107087, Lot 215 on SP 149168 and Lot 220 SP 112575 in favour of Lot 223 and Lot 224 on SP 112575, Lot 212, Lot 213 and Lot 214 on SP 149168. And at 4, Council acknowledge the existence of any constructed easement access is constructed and exists in a way it does not hinder any future development of the Council-owned lots.
Well done. I seek a mover to that recommendation. Councillor Swanborough. Any additional questions for information, councillors? If not, I'll seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Councillor Swanborough, you wish to speak to the recommendation?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. This is a good result all around. This Charlie Eden's land is one of the largest parcels of land on Tamborine Mountain that was subdivided many, many years ago, and the new developer has retained the existing subdivision, which is creating very high prestigious allotments, very large allotments on the mountain, and this is perhaps one of the best results that could have occurred for this land on the mountain. So he's to be congratulated on that, and I think I need to commend the director too for working out a solution, or the general manager, I should say, for working out a solution in relation to where Esme Street and Long Road connect on that northern side, where an easement, potentially access easement, could have destroyed a very significant strand of trees if it wasn't for council's agreement with the developer to place an easement over its own land to provide access to those 5 lots. Then it wouldn't have been as good an outcome as what it is. So I commend the recommendation, and I think it's going to open up Long Road a little bit, and I think people will see the potential, of that road even more when these access easements are put in place.
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to speak additionally to the motion? If not, we shall put the motion in its 4 parts. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously again. Thank you, councillors. Turn to the GM Council Sustainability and item 11.8 on page 73. GM. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, 11.8 is the monthly financial report for December. December represents 50% of the financial year elapsing, and as per the opening line of the executive summary there, Council's net operating surplus to the end of December is 4.4 million. Compared to the previous month, this is about a 200k difference, so there hasn't been a a major change in any of the financials previously reported. We'll go through a couple of key points. The key factors of the result are detailed in notes 1, 2 and 3 on pages 5 and 6 respectively of the attached report. We'll note again it's pleasing aspect for the month of December is out of the contestable $4.5 million worth of expenditure that is open for local suppliers. Approximately 33% of that has gone again to local suppliers, or about 1.5 million. And it's also pleasing to see the continued reduction in the rates outstanding to the tune of about 400,000 for the month of December. Other than those key points, Mr. Mayor, I'll open it to the councillors in seeking further comments or providing further comments or clarifications to the item contained in the report.
Thank you, GM. Councillors, questions for clarification to the report?
Yes,
Councillor Swanborough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to the General Manager in relation to these reports. In 2019-20, we had more information provided to councillors in these reports in relation to the progress of the Capital Works program. I'm just wondering why we aren't getting that information now in these reports.
Thank you, Councillor. You would be aware that we did split that out to allow the focus on the actual querying around the particular projects. What we do provide in the finance report is the status of financial expenditure, the committed costs. Asset Environment Sustainability provide a periodic or a quarterly update around the capital works schedule, and then that's able then to ask specific questions around the delivery of the projects rather than embed that within finance. That's contained in the Asset Environmental Sustainability. And happy for the General Manager, Asset Environmental Sustainability, to provide further comment to that in terms of timing. I believe that we did have a previous report.
Yes, so we're in a position now where we're currently putting together the first 6 months of the year as an update on where our capital projects have progressed. So that will be certainly presented to Council in the near future.
Just a point of clarification, so that report will list out the total capital program and each individual job?
Yes, and any exceptions. It'll basically highlight any issues with any of the projects that are falling behind, and also highlight any projects that have been delivered above expectations or well and truly meeting scope, but at a reduced cost.
Thank you.
GM, Council of Sustainability, would it be an accurate interpretation that the reason for moving to that more quarterly rolling reporting was that the nature of capital projects is that monthly reporting doesn't necessarily help you because of the vagaries of when accounts are received? So quarterly gives you much more sense of the real timing and effectiveness of projects, rather than being confused simply about the phasing of when someone sends a major account for a project.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor, and I would notice in the in that page there, that down the bottom, the inclusion of, to at least provide a bit of clarity about the committed cost has been included to allow that. Previously reports, it did show there'd be a big variance and of actuals, and as you explained, when the job's done and when the invoices are provided to the timing of when they're actually paid, it skewed the some interpretation of it, and allowing a more accurate reporting period better reflected the outcome of that, rather than just the financial staging of payments.
Thank you. Any other points of clarification? Councillor Enright?
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions actually to the GM, if I may. I note in the executive summary the final line referring to outstanding debtors, and I just asked the question if that item referring to recoverable works of 2.1 million, is that purely just a timing issue as far as the reason for that outstanding debtor?
Yes, they're not. It's just when councils undertake the work, be it for RMPC contracts, we will redo up a claim, and it's just the timing of that being paid. Generally, they're not we don't regard Transport Main Road as being a delinquent debtor. They're quite good in their effecting payments on a prompt basis.
I'm very pleased to hear that. Good. Question 2 refers to page 78 of the report, and a question regarding the rates and utility charges. I note that all but $4,000 has been collected from the 28.4 million in rates and utilities charges. Is this a better than average result?
That is based on the revised budget for September, because obviously when we provided the September budget, the full realisation of the growth factor wasn't realised, so that was tempered down a little bit. That is originally what was budgeted was a 57.4 million. Revising that down to 57.16 is true reflection of that following the levying in the first half rates levy. So it's within the constraints and within what we anticipated in our budget modelling. So,
and a pleasing outcome for collection of rates.
That's correct. Yes, that's posted on our receivables. So that's not actually what's collected to date. So that's the total that's being levied. You'll get an indication of what's outstanding on the following page 8 of 8 of the report that shows the outstanding rates by debtor categories. So that's what's just showing on our balance sheet is what we levied.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Any other points for clarification, councillors?
Just if I may, to the GMHR. Notice there that we're underspent.
You mean the GM people and strategy?
Yeah,
thanks.
I was sitting here,
Okay.
couldn't remember what it was. People and
That's okay.
strategy. Apologies.
She knows who she is.
So page 78 or page 3 of 8 of the report, a notice that we have a large underspend on employee expenses. Can you detail how many positions are outstanding to tally up that 1.4?
Thanks for your question, Councillor. I'll have to take that question on notice in that, as you're aware, we're currently migrating our human resource data to a new platform, which will allow us much more accurate reporting on vacancies and current recruitment processes. I can say that we have a significant number of recruitment processes underway currently. We are continuing with our refresh and refocus program of work, appointing to roles as the organisational structure is aligned to an optimal service delivery model. So I will take that question on notice and provide you with information in the near future.
Thank you. And just to clarify for the people out there for the GM sustainability, can you just detail our cash holdings versus our borrowings? As in how much we have in the bank.
Oh, okay.
Versus how much we have borrowed. So there's clarification out there that doesn't go askew.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, page 4 of the attached report, statement of financial position, or what's affectionately known as the balance sheet, provides that detail. You can see in the top there, cash, current assets, cash and investments. The year to date, that equates to about 41.47 million. Of cash, we've got receivables there of 5.2 million and inventories of 1.1. And down the bottom where it says the current liabilities and non-current liabilities, borrowings there of the current balance is about $30.5 million in borrowings with Queensland Treasury.
Thank you very much.
Just a further point of clarification to that. In the cash holding, can you provide clarification to what makes up the 41.47 million?
Yep.
What makes up the 41.47 million? 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 What makes up the that amount and what the legislative requirement is about retaining cash?
Further clarity around that is probably contained in page 7 of 8 of the report, or under the number 6 called investments. So council places any surplus funds we have at the point in time, and obviously try and maximise additional revenue in terms of interest, albeit a little low these days. There is a restriction provided on council in terms of where we place these surplus funds for investment. The bulk of the funds are contained with Queensland Treasury Corporations, which is the main basis is that our investments are covered through the risk of those investments falling over, and then they're backed up by the prudent guarantees. But the bulk, in note 6, the bulk of the investments are contained with Queensland Treasury, and you can see the applicable interest rate there is on par with.
Sorry, I may have to rephrase my clarification. In the cash that we hold, what are the components that we have to carry in that amount?
Yep. So what's contained in there, I'm presuming that the question aligns to what's called restricted and unrestricted cash. There is, obviously back to that balance sheet, there is a component of that amount that we have to hold that's backed up for provisions, which are long-term employee provisions to the tune of about $10 million. So, that whilst we have $41 million in the bank, not all that is what's called unrestricted cash. And there's a lot of that cash that council have already adopted or have already assigned to the completion of capital works. And whilst capital works, as contained in the report, is sitting at about 10 million behind. Once you take away those from that cash, there is an amount that then becomes unrestricted, and that on our discussions around budget times, that sits at around $18 million at the moment, which represents about 4 months of flexibility within council to undertake.
And just to that last point, what's the minimum that we are required to endeavour to maintain from legislation?
Legislation or based on the key sustainability indicators is about 3 months.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other points for clarification in the report, councillors? If not, can we introduce the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation for this particular item is that council endorse the monthly financial report for December 2020.
Seeker mover, Councillor Chalk, seconder. Councillor West, before any further requests for information, sorry, Councillor, any further requests for information? Seconder, Councillor West, thank you. Wish to speak further? Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally to the motion? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 11.9 on page 84 of our agendas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The agenda item 11.9, titled Standing Orders, Policy and Procedures, has been tabled today for consideration for adoption. The report itself is quite informative and provides the key aspects as to the purpose of today's report. However, I will take the opportunity to highlight and reflect the journey it's taken for these suite of documents to be tabled today. Pursuant to the sections 150F and 150G of the Local Government Act 2009, it does stipulate the requirement to prepare and adopt these meeting procedures, and it even goes so far as making reference to the model meeting procedures made available by the Department of Local Government. The rationale for today's item is not that these are being newly introduced, but mere fact that with the Local Government Legislation Integrity Amendment Regulation 2020 and Electoral and Other Legislations Accountability, Integrity and Other Matters Amendment Act coming into effect 12th of October 2020 and the subsequent changes to the Local Government Regulations 2012. There were sweeping reforms around how ordinary meetings were conducted. Also, the Department of Local Government releasing the latest iteration of their best practice standing orders for local government and standing committee meetings, and this was around October last year. Notable changes in that iteration included change of language from material and personal conflicts of interest to prescribed and declarable conflicts of interest, along with changes to the provisions that allowed council to discuss reports in closed sessions, along with enhancements to the use of teleconferencing meetings. These factors contributed to the need to review the current standing orders, and it should be noted that these standing orders have been in existence since the inception of Scenic Regional Council back in 2008, and subsequent reviews and changes as legislation and other things have ensured. The need to review these is to ensure currency relevancy, and also importantly an opportunity to go through the documentation line by line to ensure awareness and understanding with all elected members and relevant officers. It's been quite an exhaustive process to get where we are today, and certainly appreciative of the robust discussions around the proposed updates. There have been numerous workshops utilised to ensure clear understanding around the updates and conformance with the department model procedures have ensured. It's referenced in the report that 90% of the content contained in today's attachments are what is exactly prescribed in the department's model procedures, with the balance being additional procedures or protocols that ultimately reflect the needs of the organisation and to ensure that the arranged information is in a functional system. And pursuant to section 150G2B, these differences or inconsistencies to the model procedures are taken to be adopted, the model procedures, to the extent of these inconsistencies. The report, finally, Mr. Mayor, the report makes references to differences that have been discussed and contained in the attached documents for consideration. Some of these again include references to pre-motion clarification and continued facility to consider miscellaneous or general business, now proposed to be termed supplementary items. For those in the general public that are interested in obtaining a copy of the department's model meeting procedures, these have been provided previously to elected members, but those interested in obtaining a copy, I would suggest going to the website and obtaining those, or purely searching through Google Standing Orders Queensland model, and they should get a copy, a Word version of those. Outside of this commentary, Mr. Mayor, the report's tabled for consideration by council.
Thank you, GM. Councillors, questions for clarification to the report? Councillor Swanborough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have a number of questions to ask. The first question is in relation to the word discussion. And having gone through the report, I noticed that the word discussion is used 5 times in the new standing orders and procedures, but there's no definition of what discussion is in these things. Should a definition of the word discussion be included in the standing orders?
Thanks for your question, Councillor Swanborough. I guess discussions pertain to what's relevant in the dictionary. What we did add to the draft and what's being considered there is notions around, well, clarifying the difference between clarification and discussion. And that's noted in item 11 of the meeting procedure, where it used to be called pre-motion discussions, and then obviously to avoid the confusions around discussions around, or the debate of the motion, there was the seeking of clarification.
Yeah, so, okay. My next question is for clarification, is in relation to pre-motion clarification. Is it the case that we now can only ask questions in that? And are those questions deemed the same as the paragraph or the section on questions, which says there can be no discussion when we seek clarifications?
This particular matter was discussed, I guess, in a full format. It was good, and this is one of those items that's unique to this council to allow. It's not contained in the model, the department's model, but it does allow, before you get into the full debate of the motion, to seek clarity around some of what's contained in the report, and as we did before in the motion. So before, this opens up the seeking of questions or clarity before going into the full debate of the discussion or the motion.
If that clarity involves needing to discuss something, like, for instance, Councillor West, this morning demonstrated that she had something to offer for clarity in relation to the Christie Street Canungra issue, and there were some doubts about whether that was clarification or discussion. Is it the case that we should allow, discussion in certain circumstances where that discussion is needed under these standing orders? And because at the moment it seems like questions only can be asked and there can be no comment and there can be no discussion in accordance with the words that we're adopting today.
Councillor, that depends on where we are at the stage. That's where the chairperson or the mayor will seek, prior to going into the open debate or discussion around the matter, we'll facilitate the seeking or the questioning from the councillors around whether there's any seeking of further clarification prior to going into discussion.
All right, well, perhaps I could ask the question in a different way. When I read the whole document, discussion is precluded. And if you could tell me at what point in our deliberations in an ordinary meeting are we allowed to actually discuss something?
In terms of?
No, there's no in terms of. I just want to know at what point these standing orders, as they're written at the moment, allows councillors to discuss a particular issue. Is it in the pre-clarification of a motion stage? Is it in the post-moving of a motion stage, or is it in the after it's moved and seconded stage? What stage can you do a discussion?
So the discussion is opened up once the motion has been put forward. That's when the debate occurs. But I guess prior to that, as demonstrated this morning, prior to the motion being discussed, the floor is open up to seek further clarifications prior to the formal debate.
Sorry,
of the motion.
Just whilst Councillor Swanborough reflects on that, can I ask a point of clarification to your earlier comments? Are the contents of these standing orders aligned to the best practice standing orders, except for those variations that we've identified of allowing the additional transparency of clarifying questions? Is the rest of that wording consistent with the best practice and those clarifications are part of the best practice guide from the state? Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. The best practice guides, the best practice standing orders for local government and standing committee members, September 2020.
Thank you. Perhaps, Councillor, that helps you with the clarity of the reference.
Well, I understand that is the case, and I agree, that 90%, comes from the model procedures and whatever. But there is some clarification in the pre-motion clarification section 11. It says that fair and respectful, because it basically says in point 3 that the chair will need to use, make sure that clarifications are fair and respectful. Does it include the ability to ask questions and make comments in relation to clarifications given at the time by councillors or officers? So I guess I'm trying to come to terms with, what does the meaning of fair and respectful, is that licensed to allow discussion, do you think, or what is it? I'm not sure.
It allows the pre-motion clarification so far as not to then go into the next stage of debating the motion.
Okay.
which then, from point 12 of the standing orders, then the various other processes become applicable.
Councillor, just to assist the clarification, item 17.1 talks to the issue of addressing questions, and section 17 of the standing orders, which is on page 117, and certainly from a chair point of view, looking at the standing orders holistically, that's a very important point of clarification around allowing the additional clarification, which we have in principle, we've discussed through multiple workshops now as councillors to retain, because it allows us to ensure we're properly informed before a motion rests on the table. This is quite clear about when someone gives a response, it's not appropriate to, about what the appropriate response is once that question's been asked. And we did discuss this quite extensively when we workshopped this matter. Councillors, I know Christmas and New Year have intervened, but I'm sure you'll recollect the extensive discussion of this. Does that help the clarification? Councillor, do you wish to ask further points?
Well, that's what confuses me, is that point 17, basically says you can't have any argument or there can be no discussion in relation to questions. But what confuses me is that we're actually going to be asking questions, pre-motion questions. After the motion is moved, before it's seconded, we can ask questions. After there's a mover and a seconder, we can ask questions. So we're always being given the opportunity to ask questions throughout this particular document, but at no time do I see in here that there can be any discussion or comments from any councillors in relation to any reply that's been given or to any point that they want to make about a subject matter. So,
sorry, but councillor, I can't enter into that discussion until we have a motion. You've asked a question, you've been given clarity of a question.
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow this to enter into a debate. The clarity's been given. So I believe, I just confirm again, the clarification is particularly all of these sections are directly aligned to the state best practice guide. So there's no, is that a correct understanding for clarification to the room?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
So,
except in, Mr. Mayor, except in relation to this particular matter.
Sorry, councillor. Yeah,
I say
17.1 is totally from the best practice guide.
It is, Mr. Mayor, I agree, but pre-motion clarification, I think it's 16. 11. And then you move on to
Councillor, you've asked your question.
There's three lots of new clarifications in here that aren't in the
Sorry, there's only one that council has added outside of the standing orders, councillor, for clarification. That is item section 11 that we have retained, which allows clarification to a report. It does, and I believe I have demonstrated the opportunity where there is a comment that adds value as clarification to the report, not entering into debate. That's clarification is different to debate. Debate happens after the motion and happens in a particular format prescribed in the model standing orders that we are required to adopt. Councillor, I think that's the place where the matter progresses. Am I correct in that understanding, GM?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. I mean that particular 11 point item about the pre-motion clarification was, we don't have to have that in our model standing orders. It certainly isn't in the state governments, but it was discussed and workshop, and it was provided. It added value to allow once the motion was tabled and debated, it allowed seeking of further clarity prior to that step and asking questions and responding to councillors and seeking further clarity from their questions as well.
So any other points of clarification, questions for clarification to the report? Councillors.
No, Mr. Mayor, it hasn't really answered my question. I think I can only assume from the answers given that there isn't discussion allowed at any time until. I'm trying to get some feedback on my understanding.
Please stop. That's not appropriate comment to add clarity to the report. You're positioning something as a debating point. That can be discussed when it's a motion. You can make your comments then. That's an example of comments that shouldn't be made as in the clarifying part of a report. They're made in the debating part of a motion.
In the debating part of the motion, Mr. Mayor, the mover can now seek clarification. The mover can now speak for 5 minutes.
Sorry, are you asking another question? So the subtlety is,
I was going to, Mayor, but you've interrupted me.
Sorry, yes, Councillor, I did, because I want to be very clear that you don't step into an inappropriate space. The clarity is when we're in pre-motion clarification, it's about ensuring that there's adequate information in the report or clarifying any wording that the officers have put forward in the report, or adding a comment of clarification, which was beneficial this morning from Councillor West. It isn't in promoting a position on the outcome of a motion. That's the subtle difference. Where you move forward, where someone moves forward into arguing the case about something, that's debate, and that's quite clearly to be addressed after a motion is on the table. That's very clear. That's establishing that from a meeting procedure point of view, Councillor, for clarification, not for debate. So I'm happy that you want to make those comments. If they are not about the decision of the motion, if you are seeking to clarify an additional point in what I would call a non-pejorative way, very happy for you to do so. Very happy for you if you wish to make that comment, Councillor. So otherwise we need to move forward.
Thank you, Mayor. I have another question, a clarification. 16.2 says a councillor may make a request to the chairperson for further information before the motion or amendment is seconded. Is that provision in the model local laws? 16.2.
That particular item, I believe that there was some words changed. I will read what's contained in the model, and then obviously as part of the review, we did when we went line by line to clarify so that there was clear understanding around it. What's contained in 16.2, based on the department's models, meeting procedures, states that the chairperson will manage the debate by allowing the councillor who proposed the motion the option of speaking first in the motion. The chairperson will carry on any other councillors who wish to speak against the motion, and alternately for and against the motion as available until all councillors who wish to speak have had the opportunity.
Sorry, that's item 16.4.
Oh.
I believe the matter relates to 16.2. 16 point.
That's correct, Mayor.
Sorry.
Yes, 16.2. The request for further information. My understanding from the workshop was that that was part of the prescribed model standing orders. Just for the benefit of those not in the room, we have unfortunately had a departure of a key staff member who was involved in this preparation. So we're just having to bridge some gaps in that.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I mixed the wrong numbers up. Yes, what's contained in the model, 16.3, what we've included there was just added the first line around a councillor may make a request to the chairperson for further information before the motion or amendment is seconded. What's contained in the model is a councillor may make the request to the chairperson, request the chairperson for further information before or after each motion is seconded. Is that what?
Yeah, and that was my point earlier, Mr. Mayor. This is a case of, it's a new provision, it's not in the model laws, that a councillor may make a request to the chairperson for further information before the motion or amendment is seconded.
Sorry, so, it is in there. I believe that just said it was in
before it's seconded. The model laws actually say that you can't speak to a motion unless it's seconded.
That's correct.
Yeah, 16.3 in the model relates a councillor may make a request to the chairperson for further information before or after the motion is amended or seconded. That's what's contained in the 16.3 in the model. We just included the line around make a councillor being able to make a request to the chairperson for further information, and then added the notion around the request for further information must be received prior to seconding.
Must be received prior to seconding.
Prior to seconding of the motion, so that it closes the debate.
So, and councillor, just for clarity, the standing orders also talk to it, and we discussed this in the workshop. Asking that question is not deemed to be speaking to the motion.
I understand that, Mr. Mayor.
So that's why it's quite possible to ask the question at that point in time, because asking the question is not deemed, that's the clarification to this matter, is not deemed to be. So I believe it's been answered.
Look, it has been answered, Mayor, but it just clarifies what I was saying. And that is that, look at the summary of this now. You can do pre-motion clarifications under section 11, go to section 16. You can do more clarifications after a motion's been moved, but before it's even been seconded. And then you can do more clarifications after the motion's been seconded. So we have a situation here. There's 3 times in these standing orders where you can seek clarifications and ask questions, but there's no time in these standing orders when you can discuss anything between councillors.
So, sorry, councillor, that's not adding clarity to the report. That's putting a position about the proposed motion. So please, I understand your frustration. I understand you have a frustration. The clarification has been provided about how the requirements have been put together in the model guides from the state. Far be it from us to be trying to tell the state whether or not they've got that right, and therefore we've complied with that. We have added an additional opportunity, the clarification to the matter before us, councillors. We in our discussions have proposed to add an additional opportunity and with the custom and practice of that clarification before it becomes a motion, because when you get to that point, it can somewhat constrain the opportunity for asking those questions. That was the reason we made the we have been exercising that custom and practice for a couple of years now, and it's why we have proposed, I believe, in our workshopping process to continue to add that for additional transparency in our meetings. However, are there any other points of questions for clarification or comments for clarification, not positioning?
Yes, Mr. Baird, on number 18.4 of the standing orders, which is on page, it says, councillors, it's on page 117 of the report. It says, councillors have the right to request that their names and how they voted be recorded in the minutes if they so request for voting other than by division. I just wonder if there could be some clarification how that would actually work.
This was a point that was actually discussed at the time of the workshop, and I think it just supports the way the system, if you looked on the screen, I guess it provides clarity to those listeners because they don't view the monitor, but when there is a division called, if you do pay notice to the attention, you actually see the mayor does call the division, or the chairperson does call the division, but the actual name is recorded. If they do so, if a council decides to call a division on the matter, the name is listed as that person making the division.
The question then is, if a division is not called, which seems to be what this is saying, a councillor can request that their names be recorded in the minutes as to how they voted. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How is that provision going to work if a person wants to do this but he doesn't want to have a division, but then someone calls a division? Does a division override the first thing?
That's an input. Could I just ask from the workshopping conversation, and it's unfortunate that we don't have relevant person here, my understanding that particular component there was in the circumstance where there are multi-councillor, these are standard terms, and there are multi-councillor divisions in some councils, not this council. So does that add clarification to that? The CEO, you wish to?
There was some confusion around the big D and little d around divisions and the nature of the division, and this provided clarity in terms of what was being.
Mr. Mayor, any councillor at any time can ask that their name be recorded in the way that they chose to vote, and we would make that as a statement. It would be councillor so-and-so requested that they be recorded as voting against, even without a division. And we do have that on occasion, rare occasion, remembering that our Info Council minute recording system, the minutes secretariat will always identify those councillors who voted for and against in our record keeping, unless it's unanimous. But any councillor at any time can ask that their name be listed against that item, and which we will do that in a sentence.
Yeah, I understand that, and that's where the mechanics of this, Mr. CEO, sort of came into play, because if someone wanted to do that but didn't want to record it in a division, that would be denied to him if someone called a division, wouldn't it? The division would override his request.
Sorry, councillor, can you? In a declared division, all councillors' identity and how they voted is, so it would complement the request from someone to have their vote. But if you wished, the practice in this council, for clarification, GM, the practice in this council is that whilst in the operational meeting I declare it by division, in the minutes, the record of meeting, it shows by the name of councillor automatically.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
So for us, councillor, I would argue that the clarification says that this is, whilst it's part of the standing orders, it's something of a moot point because of the process by which we manage our records. So do you have any other clarifications?
No, so that seems to be redundant for us. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Mayor?
I think you should always preserve it in case there's a circumstance. It doesn't carry any burden for us, I would have thought, from a clarification point of view, but you can discuss that when we get into a motion and debate whether you wish to seek an amendment, but not at this point in time.
So, I mean, just another question was in relation on page 121 of the report. And item 22.6, it says here that, and you know, I do recall this was brought up in the workshop, it doesn't seem to have been changed. The meeting will only be closed for the purposes of discussion between councillors. Following the discussion of the closed item, the chairperson will call for a resolution to return into open council. So I need to clarify whether what that is saying is that discussion is not allowed in open council, but discussion is allowed in closed meeting sessions.
Well, Councillor, I will attempt to clarify that one because I've ridden this journey through these quite extensively and in their prior versions. A closed meeting of council cannot have debate because debate is associated with a motion and a resolution, and it would be illegal for us in a closed meeting to be doing anything other than discussing the matter that's on the table for us. Then we return, as is well documented, we return into open session to deal with the resolution that arises from the confidential material that we have discussed. That's why discussion occurs in that forum. So the word discussion is a very generic term and deals with a wide range of things, but for clarity, the form of discussion that can occur in a closed meeting cannot be in the form of debate associated with the motion. That's the clarification of why you can only have generic discussion and clarification in a closed meeting, because you're trying to ensure that you adequately understand the material before you come back to consider the resolution in public. Is that a correct interpretation? That's from a clarification point of view.
Says yes, Mayor. That's certainly what occurs now.
But that's what's required.
That's what's required, and that's what council exercises.
Sorry, yes, Councillor McGuinness.
Mayor, I'm reading that and taken literally. It is only, those words suggest it's only between councillors and not with the input of staff. Should we, without getting into a discussion on it, should the staff word be considered there? Or could I ask the General Manager, has the word staff or executive been considered there?
Again, additionally to that, what are the model standing orders talk to on that item is probably important.
I'm taking it literally, I know, but it's only a discussion between councillors and no one else in the room. I'm suggesting the way that's written there.
Well, it doesn't add further to that, Mr. Mayor, but I guess I understand it. It's the intent of it is in the councillor elected member seeking further clarity, they may address through the chairperson to request that information from them.
So, question to the CEO or to the GM, Council Sustainability. In the framing and in the context of meeting procedures and standing orders, would it be a correct interpretation that those elements apply to the processes that councillors are involved in, and that officers have a different set of constraints? Officers are not formally participants in the meeting because they don't play a part in the making of decisions. Only councillors make decisions in meetings, and officers are here to provide supporting information or take away additional actions to provide, to take action or to act on the decisions of the meeting. So to the clarification of this item, at no point do standing orders specifically refer to the participation of other parties, because they are only here by invitation, effectively, of the elected members to contribute to good meeting process and expert contribution. Is that a correct understanding? Just as again, trying to get this clear for those listening in. That's been the informing understanding.
Throughout the document, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The discussion is between elected members. Clarity is sought from officers, but that's just based on to allow the elected member to form an opinion of that. Not the officers don't get involved in the formal discussions or debating, but more seeking provision of clarity and supporting document or information to allow the councillors.
So that begs a question, another question to the General Manager. You made the statement that clarification is only from officers. Discussion is between councillors. So does that mean that every time we seek clarification, we can't seek clarification from the other councillors?
Sorry, Councillor. I think you may have. I may have misheard it as well, but I understood officers are only here to provide clarification, not officers are the only ones who can provide clarification. So their role is quite clear, that that's their purpose here, not to participate in debate. That was my understanding of the clarifying comments.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Rather than they're the only ones who can provide clarification. Sorry, hope that, is that an accurate understanding, GM? Could you just...
That's correct, and that's contained in item 17 at Mr. Councillor Swamber raised before. I mean, councillor may ask a question or reply to another councillor, as pointed out.
Yeah, I thought that provision was in there, but I didn't understand why you said what you said at that time.
But I think we've clarified what you heard wasn't quite what was described. Any other points for clarification to this report, councillors? Councillor West?
Sorry, Mayor, I just have a very small matter of a typing error. I believe it's a typing error. Page 88 of 139, the second paragraph, which says following the notion with an N, to have it lay on the table. I believe it should be an M. So it was a motion, was that right? At the page 88 of 139. Or 88.
That's the old version. Is that the old version? Or is that, no, is that
That's
in,
part of the body of the report.
It's in the body of the report.
yeah.
Yes,
It
I
should
think
say
it
motion.
should say motion.
motion.
It should say motion. It's a small matter, but it is.
Question. Is it in the new, are you saying that's in the new?
No, that's just in the body of the report, Mr. Mayor, just prior to the,
yeah.
That's not.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that clarification, Councillor. Any other points for clarification?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, on page 132, item 7.1, it says, Council must be consistent with the local government principle of transparent and accountable decision-making in the public interest by dealing with suspected inappropriate conduct in an open meeting of the Council. And then it's got a disclaimer. However, where the complainant or other parties may be adversely affected due to the nature of the complaint, the council may resolve to go into closed session. The question is, where did the words adversely affected come from? Because they don't appear to be in accordance with section 254J of the Local Government Act.
Standing orders.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Swamper. We'll ask, we do have our acting governance principal specialist. Susan, are you able to elaborate on that query?
Oh, thank you. Are we able to confirm if that wording came directly from the best practice standing orders, GM, through the chair?
That's the part of the conduct documentation. I'm just trying to.
I have that here, Mr. Mayor, for the General Managers. I might say to him that section in the model practice standing orders, when it talks about 27.1, it talks about it matters that may directly affect the health and safety of an individual or a group of individuals will allow a meeting to be closed, but there is nothing in the practice guide that says, you know, just because other parties may be adversely affected due to the nature of the complaint, the council may resolve to go into closed session. Well, clearly that is completely contrary to what the legislation's saying.
Councillors, I'm going to propose, given that the GM, unfortunately, these questions, it's disappointing. We've had multiple days access to this agenda to.
Mr. Mayor,
have you been able to find?
Yes,
that? Otherwise,
Mr. Mayor,
I was going to propose an adjournment while you.
Section 254J of the Local Government Regulations, the exact wording on there, 254J 3F, matters that may directly affect the health and safety. Or
that's the right one.
That's. Sorry, sir. Yeah, I'll go with your original.
So
whilst
I believe this is a significant component to get right. We have workshopped it before. However, to allow for clarity, councillors, it's almost 11 o'clock. I'm going to propose that we take a 15-minute adjournment to return to this process of clarification before we close out this item. Unless there's any strong opposition, that allows the GM to reflect on the audit trail for getting to those points. Okay. To the gallery, we shall return. We're near enough to 11, so let's return at 11:15, please. Thank you.
There, if we can get them on the table, and we don't want to have to do this down the track again.
Well,
I understand it's right to do it now, but if there was other questions that needed further clarification, we're better off knowing them now.
Unfortunately, councillor, we have a process that gives multiple days to bring forward questions, and that has not necessarily given us the opportunity to have the best preparation for this discussion. So I note your question. I'm not sure. Each time I think we've reached a close, I find another question, so I suspect that'll continue. We'll adjourn now. We're now back live. Welcome back to the digital gallery. Councillors, we're now returned in session, and GM, do you have any clarification to that prior query?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome back, listeners and the general public. Yes, following review of some notes of that, the intent by including adversely affected obviously goes against what's contained in 254JF around the matters that may directly affect the health and safety of the individual or groups of individuals. This particular aspect relates to a referral from the OIA undertaking an investigation, in which case council can discuss that in a closed. So the intent of what putting adversely affected, the intent is to take into account health and safety as well as other aspects around credibility, financial and or other aspects that may come out as part of disclosing identity or names of particulars. The OIA state that the identity of a complainant or complainants will be protected unless disclosure is required for investigations or prosecution, in which case then complainants will be advised if their identity will be disclosed. In saying that, Mr. Mayor, to progress the, I'm happy to, for when that matter comes, a amendment. And just to clarify, that is not in the standing orders procedures, that's in the standing orders administration and conduct document. Councillor Swanborough, is that?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. And whilst you can't move an amendment, I'm happy to move that amendment.
So
when it comes to that stage, I guess.
When it comes to that.
Can we, are there any other points of clarification, councillors?
Yeah, just one more, Mayor. And it's in relation to the policy of council. I just got to get the page number here. The policy, I haven't got the page, but I'll talk to it while I'm looking.
Sorry, we need to be able to be with you. If you're going to raise the question, we need to understand where it rises from.
Yeah, I'm just looking for it.
Councillor, I think
Should I hum a few bars?
I think you'll find, Councillor, I think you'll find the new policy commences on page 105.
Yeah, look, I'm just going to the officer's report because I think it's in there that I'm wanting to seek clarification on.
So we're now not in the...
No, I'm going up to the officer's report. The officer's report says that in the noteworthy changes that the council was one of the few...
Sorry, what page, Councillor?
Sorry, yeah, it's on, now I'm on page 86. And it talks about the removal of miscellaneous business, and
which paragraph? Some whole page.
Noteworthy changes.
Noteworthy changes. Second paragraph. I wasn't sure from reading all this whether that was going to be retained in some form or was it going to be deleted altogether. Or you mentioned it before about it's going to be changed to late items or something. What is the story with that?
The report in the paragraph pertaining to, I think it's understood. So word for word, it's understood there's no appetite, obviously, to remove miscellaneous or general business altogether, but it, obviously to preserve an item or the council's interest in that, you know, late business, there hasn't been any opportunity to advise whether there's any conflicts of interest. You know, there is appetite still to have some sort of ability to deliver a what's now called supplementary items, mindful of the issues that tabling of these would cause on the normal scheme of things.
So just for clarity to the question, if I'm hearing that right, miscellaneous business will be deleted and our agendas will include the provision for supplementary items as a heading, as one of the, it's just one of the structure of the agenda changes. And there were a number of others about where deputations were received and petitions would be tabled because of that change. That's what reads on, I believe, down that page. Is that the right clarification of those points?
Sorry, just
I think that's discussion that's been provided, but that supplementary is not listed in on page 110, 111.
110.
Yeah, the CEO is correct. I can't find reference to supplementary items anywhere in a search of the document.
And one of my understanding, CEO, if you could reflect on your memory post-Christmas, that when we had that discussion, it was the concern about retaining that item was that it gave the impression of allowing items to appear outside of due process.
yeah, the line there, Mr. Mayor, sorry, around the confusion, the line around that matter about why not to include those was councils were not able to consider whether they had a prescribed or declarable conflict of interest in relation to the matter to be debated.
Just a point of clarification on that response. The Local Government Act in relation to those matters in the 150 sections, you know, doesn't necessarily deem or require a councillor to have prior knowledge of his conflict of interest or have time to consider it. Matter of fact, the legislation talks about if during a meeting, you know, someone realises that they may have a conflict of interest, that's the time to declare it. So I don't think there's necessarily anything that needs to reflect that council needs more time, you know, in order to consider whether they've got a conflict of interest.
And that's just one item, Councillor Romper, thank you for that. And I guess the author at the time also indicated in the report a number of other matters in there that, yeah, contrary to the local government principles of transparency about not being included in the agenda for the general public to have awareness of or as such.
So we have a proposed, again, we have workshopped this multiple times. We have a proposed on at page 110, item 4.3.
What page is that, Mayor, again?
Page 110.
Okay.
Item 4.3 talks about the structure of the agenda, which makes this discussion a moot discussion. in our workshop process, we have not considered to include that item. So it's not part of what we were considering today. So unless someone wishes to propose it by amendment, it is not part of what we are discussing as our proposed standing orders. Okay, clarifications to the report. Councillor McGuinness.
So could I ask, in the case of after the last state election where we unanimously raised the issue, but everyone was in favour of it, unanimously congratulated John Krause on his re-election, that wasn't a notice of motion, should have been. Maybe that would have been an option, but sometimes things like that are the next meeting straight after that. Is something like that able to be put on there? I'll ask the General Manager, is that still able to be put on there? Is a councillor is able to raise that from the floor?
Thank you, Councillor McGuinness. There is an item, it says the right-hand said that the petitions and voter thanks may be dealt with as part of miscellaneous business, suggested the voter thanks be appropriately dealt with under announcements. And page 110 of the report still includes announcements in there, so the ability for those to be raised is included page 111 announcements, Mayor, minutes for that consideration.
So, question.
Thank you for that clarification.
So the question is, therefore, if we don't have supplementary items or miscellaneous business, whatever, sure, we can deal with votes of thanks, I guess, in that new placeholder. But where is there an opportunity for councillors themselves to be able to bring up an item that may not be related to that, which could be something as insignificant as a vote of thanks? Are we then precluded from coming to an ordinary meeting, which we have only once a fortnight, and then not being able to put something that's timely to the council as a body to make a decision?
Sorry, can you clarify what the question? There are about 4 different parts here. Can you just give clarity? I can see the GM struggling which part of what you've asked. Is the question, Councillor, what's the provision for councillors to bring a matter before council? On
the day, that's right. What is the, you've got the provision, Mr. Mayor, of having a mayoral minute, which is a miscellaneous business without notice. So where is the councillors, the elected members, the other councillors' ability to bring up an issue of importance in their division or somewhere else in these standing orders if we take away supplementary items?
Sorry, Councillor, there has never been a provision for councillors to bring up. So we aren't, for clarity, that we are not these standing order updates are not doing away with a provision that was there. There was no provision for councillors to bring something up without a proper notice of motion. A vote of thanks will be dealt with under announcements because it is not something that is of a material nature requiring proper report, analysis and investigation to put forward. That's why I recall from our workshopping conversation that for me was the intent of that differentiation. And I understood that our clarification was the standing orders, the model standing orders do not provide for councillors bringing matters up except through the provision of a notice of motion duly formed at the appropriate time. Is that an accurate?
That's correct, Mayor. And I certainly wouldn't encourage the practice of having or tabling things where officers and or other councils, there's minimal information that may be available to make a formed decision. Would suggest in those instances where due process is followed, that any matters that are requiring tabling would go through the reporting to the relevant officers to progress to the table, so that the relevant information and more importantly transparency. You don't want to make a decision without information, especially with that wasn't even included in the agenda on without providing all the appropriate information. Unless it goes through the due process of notice of motion.
Thank you for clarification. Do you have another question of clarification?
Yes,
Councillors?
on page 188 of the minutes of the ordinary meeting on the 14th of December. There's a placeholder on that page that says miscellaneous business. So I've just heard that there's no miscellaneous business. It's going to be there, but it's been there all along, hasn't it?
Sorry, Councillor, you would recall that the original this original report was to be adopted at the 14th December, but it lay on the table. So that was when we further workshop was not required, and as such what's contained in today's agenda item for consideration is following that. So the minutes contain, or the minutes that are referring to
probably just I'm not referring to those draft documents. I'm referring to the actual agenda of the council that we adhered to at the last meeting, has a placeholder called miscellaneous business.
Councillor, I think it's easy to clarify that there are things that have gone before, and once this is put in place, there will be things that will go forward. We haven't been able to amend the agenda structure from the previous meeting, because even if we'd been successful in voting on this, the agenda for that meeting would have still been structured under the old pro forma. And if we moved through this, the clarification, if we had moved through this in due process last meeting, today's meeting would have been structured under the new pro forma. I would seek, is that a correct understanding?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor, and in fact,
I'm just turning to the minutes secretary for guidance.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. So, for example, the minutes of today's meeting will show miscellaneous business also. So until there is an adoption of a new structure for the agenda and minutes, then they will remain as they currently are. So last month's December's ordinary minutes showed miscellaneous. Today's ordinary minutes will show miscellaneous. So until new procedures and standing orders are adopted, that will not change.
Sorry, Councillor,
Mr. No, it hasn't been clarified. I mean, certainly I don't disagree with anything that you say, but it hasn't clarified. The issue here is that up until the last meeting of council, councillors under the standing orders had the ability to raise miscellaneous business if they wanted to. If that was removed, councillors don't have the opportunity to raise miscellaneous business. Is that what we want, and is that what ratepayers want us to have?
Councillor, just let's clarify. Did the provision of miscellaneous business allow councillors to put notices of motion without due notice? Can we clarify that from the existing standing orders?
No, Mr. Mayor.
No, it didn't allow that provision, councillor.
To do what?
To put a matter without proper notice of motion. It did not allow miscellaneous
to just drop.
Did not allow that. Your point of clarification is inaccurate. Is the point. And GM, can you clarify and between yourself and showing your assistance, the provision of miscellaneous business in the outgoing standing orders did not include a provision for councillors to table a matter of Sorry, my microphone is off because we were overloaded for a minute. We just need, Councillor, I might have to ask you from time to time to switch your microphone off so others can get. So for clarity, I'll have to try to repeat that. For clarity, the outgoing standing orders have a provision for miscellaneous business. However, that provision did not include the opportunity for councillors to table matters of business without a proper formed notice of motion to be joined to the agenda. Is that a correct understanding of the current standing orders?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
So there is no loss of provision for councillors. The process remains the same as it has been. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes.
Regarding councillors tabling agenda items?
Yes, and the report actually makes reference to that the notion that having miscellaneous business may give the impression that some business that ought to be published is dealt with without notice because of a desire to withhold timely information, which is contrary to the local government principle about transparency again.
That's a good point. Can you tell me how deleting miscellaneous business from an agenda and denying councillors the opportunity to raise issues of concern in the community at a council meeting is not in the interest of transparency?
Councillor, that is now argumentative. You've had the question asked and answered that miscellaneous business did not provide for that for councillors. You are making a false point. Miscellaneous business did not allow for councillors to raise a matter without a proper notice of motion that formed then part of the agenda. And that will continue to be available for councillors, but it will be included into the body of the business of the meeting, is my understanding under what's proposed. Is that a correct clarification that the exact same...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Point of order.
Well,
point of order.
Thank you, Councillor.
Mr Mayor, I was asked to ask a clarification of the director. If you wind back the tape and listen, I asked a question. And then I was interrupted by you saying it wasn't a question, that I was doing something different than asking a question. Well, that wasn't the case. And you've gone on and told me I was wrong, and then you've gone to elaborate, and then you've asked for confirmation by the director. Is that correct? On 2 occasions. I mean, that is not the role of the chair to do that. And I ask that if I asked a question, I can get an answer without interruption from the chair.
Sorry, Councillor, I noted. However, you did receive an answer and you have not accepted the answer, and you have not accepted the additional information. So in asking your question, you are posing a false interpretation on what has previously been the case, which is misleading to the meeting. So please be accurate in what you are asking about miscellaneous business.
Can I ask the question again, Mr Mayor, in the interest of clarification?
Ask a question that is properly formed against the structure of the standing orders as they were or as they're going to be.
I just want to ask the same question that I asked before and ask the director to answer it.
Well, we don't have a director.
General manager.
We have a general manager, Councillor.
Yeah, that's very pedantic, but can I ask the question?
Please, Councillor.
The question is, how is transparency served by taking away something that elected councillors could do in the past but now can't do?
I take that question as being, I guess my answer is structured the way of running, tailoring the meeting to achieve the objectives of the meeting. You can raise points of concerns around matters that are on the agenda, but to merely raise what you're intending or what you're stipulating without due process or allowing research by officers or of the such, that's a one side. You know, I guess we're taking that question as a question on notice to provide a valid response of any kind. However, you know, in the spirit of transparency, what we're discussing is the agenda, and what the general public has access to is the agenda at the time. To just you know, just drop the notion around just dropping additional items on the agenda for debate or discussion, or raising of concern that don't pertain to items in the agenda. I don't know what purpose or effectiveness that would have on the meeting.
I have another question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, councillor.
The question is, the standing orders provide a process for councillors to move a motion. They need a seconder for that motion before the discussion can go ahead. Why are you saying that we're going to drop stuff on the table for discussion? There is a process that has to go on regardless, and that is the legislated process in the standing orders. So it's not the case, or is it the case that a councillor can stand up in miscellaneous business and rave on about an issue without first getting a consensus of the council to proceed?
Sorry, councillor, it was remiss of me to be pedantic, but that is correct. But that is the same as you know, to drop a notion to go through the process of a matter that's not currently in the agenda, to be able to, you know, as you said, it can be rejected. So there's nothing that's contained in the standing orders now. So I don't know where else or what other intent you're trying to.
Can I perhaps try to help? Councillor Swanborough, can you please identify from the outgoing standing orders which opportunity is removed, besides the heading of miscellaneous business, which opportunity is removed for councillors? Because I cannot identify it. The requirement has been quite clearly there for councillors raising a notice of motion to follow a particular process.
Yes, I'd love to answer that question, Mr. Mayor, and I have the document in front of me here. It's Division 2, Proceedings for Meetings.
Councillor, can you tell us what page in the report? Because those
look,
are in the report.
I'm referring to Council Policy CMO 3.01
Sorry, Councillor,
CP.
please, in the report, deal with the matters that are in the report, not documents that are outside
Mr. Mayor,
the report.
Mayor, the old standing orders aren't in this report. As the report says, if you read it, that there's no marked up copy. This is only the reports that we've been asked to approve today. If we want to go back to the previous council meeting in the 14th of December, you'll find, well, you actually won't, you may not even find the standing orders there, but I'm just referring to council existing standing orders. And I don't think it has to be in the report for me to comment on.
Sorry, Councillor, I refer you to the attachments for the report today. Standing orders policy as adopted 27th of May, which is the outgoing policy. Standing orders procedure as approved 27th of May, which is also the outgoing procedure, which deals with the standing orders, and that's replaced by attachments 3, 4 and 5 with the restructure. So
okay,
they are
right.
in the report.
You're right, they are in the report.
So can you
I forgot that, Mr. Mayor.
Just please.
So I can find that number for you. So it's if we go through that document that's open on our screens, it's Division 2, Proceedings for Meetings.
So
Proceedings of meetings here, it's a different number, but that's fine.
sorry, well, this is the version.
I'll talk to this, that's fine. So on that particular page, you've got 5.4, you've got the placeholders, which authorises, by mere being a placeholder, the business of council that can be considered. Now, if I took away apologies, if I took away confirmation of minutes, then there would not be a place in the standing orders for those to be considered. And by virtue of the fact that there is a placeholder on the standing orders that says miscellaneous business authorises that particular business to be carried out, it doesn't need another section to back it up, as you're suggesting.
Sorry, Councillor, I am confused even more by that. Miscellaneous business doesn't suggest anything that you're alluding to, and that's why the clarification from the GM once again is important. The removal of that heading to ensure that there is clarity that council, in accordance with the concerns in the legislation around transparency, that matters are properly prepared and put into the business of the meeting, which includes matters raised by councillors. So I'm still trying to identify where you're suggesting there is a removal of the opportunity. So could you add clarification?
Councillor, just to understand your question, with the removal of the heading miscellaneous business, it was felt that, and following on from the model procedures, it was felt that the use historically at Scenic Rim has been, miscellaneous business has been things such as votes of thanks, councillors who've perhaps been to a conference and they want to update the council on what they witnessed or undertook at that conference. So things like petitions also have been traditionally raised at miscellaneous business. So with the new set out in the new standing orders, those types of things have been included. So the petitions, also announcements for votes of thanks, things like that. Councillors have always been given the opportunity to raise anything potentially big if they want a decision of council, and that's via the notice of motion, which is in writing to the CEO. So those notice of motion that are notified to the CEO, they would be raised under business, consideration of business of the meeting. So if you had a matter that you wished the council to discuss and decide on, you can still, and have always been able to, write to the CEO, set out the detail and propose the motion that you intend to raise at the meeting, and that would be under consideration of business of the meeting. So there was never a feeling that removing miscellaneous business took away from councillors' opportunity to raise any particular matter.
Look, I understand, and I concur with what you're saying as past practice and how it operates. I'm more concerned about the legalities of this than anything. Practice and tradition and whatever are different to the law, and the law as it is at the moment gave a right to council to raise miscellaneous business if they wanted to, and then if the councils were interested in dealing with it, they could say yes or no whether they seconded a motion or if a motion was even proposed, which probably would have to be. So my concern is all the arguments that you've put forward in relation to transparency, in relation to conflicts of interest, not being able to foreshadow what you've got one, all the arguments in relation to we don't want any surprises, etc., etc. And that's the reason we want to remove miscellaneous business, doesn't seem genuine, because we still have a mayoral minute.
Councillor, you're now moving out of clarification again and putting pejorative opinion on the table. Can you please keep the separation? You can save that for the debate. Okay, you've moved, I gave you great latitude there with your commentary, but you've moved too far. Please just constrain yourself. Yes, please, CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll note that one of the reasons that we provided some focus to the issue around miscellaneous business is that we were contacted by another council who, in an audit process, had been raised with them that miscellaneous business was not something that a local government was able to record as a section of their agenda anymore. And we were one of the remaining councils that had that provision. And how did we have approval to have that? Secondly, I'll add, Mr. Mayor, that within the standing orders, the proposed standing orders, on page 110 in clause 1.3, it does allow a matter to be raised by a councillor with the permission of the other councillors, otherwise than in conformity with the standing orders. And equally, clause 27 on page 124 also allows a councillor to raise a matter which isn't dealt with anywhere else in the standing orders. Those provisions are reasonably worded in terms of how they were previously worded. I'll say that's probably a little clearer. Council have talked about that on a number of occasions, and if you remember back some meetings ago where the Mayor provided opportunity for councillors to the pre-motion, I'm loath to use the word discussion, clarification, a motion was actually raised using clause 27 or whatever number it was, sorry Mr Mayor, in the previous version to enable councillors to do that because it wasn't provided for in the standing orders. So those two clauses are in there for really a catch-all for any other matter. And as I said, we were one of the few councils, as it says in the report, that still had miscellaneous business, and it was recommended to us that that was not something that we should allow for anymore, because that in itself was not a lawful provision that we should be providing in standing orders.
Thank you, CEO, for that enlightening clarification. Are there any further questions for clarity to the matter that is before us?
Yes, just another point of clarification, Mr Mayor. In relation to mayoral minutes, I understand that they also, for the same reason miscellaneous has been removed, the standard procedures also recommend that mayoral minutes be removed for all those same reasons the CEO has just identified. Why is it that our council is going to give the mayor the opportunity to raise issues without notice, but councillors won't be able to?
Well, I will provide some comment to that and just reflect on the workshop process that we collectively as councillors went through, and I said at that occasion I'm ambivalent about the preservation of it. It provides opportunity for extreme circumstance matters to be considered and properly prepared, but I'm at the whim of the councillors, and I'm very cautious about the use of it, but it does come with a burden of responsibility to properly communicate those items and put clarification into them should they be provided. But I'm not wedded to that retention. It was a product of our workshop discussions, councillors. That's still part of the discussion of this document. That's the only clarification that I can provide.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Councillor McConnell.
Can I just ask Councillor Swanborough, in our 3-hour meeting where we discussed all of these policies, why didn't you bring any of this up instead of sitting there and saying nothing? Is that a question?
So, Councillor, I probably can't allow that in clarification of the report. I think I understand the sentiment, but I just need to ask you to withdraw that query. I think. Can I ask it in the next part? I think we'll get to the debate of the motion shortly.
Thank you.
However,
okay, I'll withdraw the question then.
Thank you. any other points of clarification to the matter before us? Okay, then I'm now going to ask the GM to return to the recommendation, and we'll work our way through this next step of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The current recommendations as it currently stands is that 1, council note the legislative requirement to adopt certain meeting procedures. 2, council rescind the current council policy standing orders. 3, council adopt the revised council policy standing orders. 4, council adopt the council procedure standing orders. 5, council adopt the council procedure standing orders administration and conduct. And 6, council note that the current standing order procedure dated 27th of May 2019 will be formally rescinded by the Chief Executive Officer.
Do I have a mover to the recommendation in its 6 parts?
Mayor, the GM before suggested that he was going to delete.
I can't. I need a mover before I can.
Okay, I'll move
anything further.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor McGuinness. Now,
and in moving it,
any points of additional information required before we move forward?
Was it the GM's intention to delete that half a paragraph that he suggested earlier for completeness of the resolution?
7.1.
Councillor, I believe there's not a deletion, but an amendment was intended, and I believe Councillor Swanborough had anecdotally suggested.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if you
propose an amendment once we get a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and I just refer to the officer's report that makes it quite clear that the old practice of what's being suggested, where
sorry, Councillor, at the moment, do you have an additional request for information?
Well, my information is, could the General Manager explain the process of asking directors to change their recommendations and whether that's the process that's recommended?
Sorry, Councillor, again, you've been in the new council for some time. We have not had directors for quite some time. Please try to be respectful with the titles for people in the room, the General Managers. Thank you. GM, Council Sustainability, that request for additional information?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. The additional information we've referred to before is contained in page 132 of the report, item 7.1, where the concern was that the wording in reference to an OIA referral, using the words adversely affected, what's currently contained in Local Government Regulation 254J refers to the health and well-being being affected, proposing as an alternate amendment or an inclusion in the recommendation is that the reference to that.
Sorry, just for clarity, I think the question was not relating to the specifics of that matter. If I hear Councillor Swanborough, Councillor, please forgive me if I've got this wrong. The council was asking, there were some prior practices where before it became a motion, we were requesting the officers to amend. I thought previously we've clarified that wasn't a proper process, and we have stopped that behaviour long before the transition to these standing orders. However, is that the matter you were seeking clarity on, Councillor Swanborough?
It was, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. And I believe
that's correct, Mr. Mayor. You don't have to seek the approval of the officer because council makes a decision, and council can put forward an amendment to a resolution then appropriately. You don't need to seek the author's approval.
Thank you. So now, any other requests for information before I move to seek a seconder? I'll seek a seconder. Councillor Enright. We now have an active motion. now, before we move to debate of the motion, I should consider if there, before I ask the mover to speak, is there an intention by someone to propose an amendment, which I anecdotally understand there is?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'll be proposing a series of amendments for consideration.
Please propose your amendment, councillor. This is the time.
Yes, that's good. Thank you, Mr Mayor. The first amendment I'd like to propose is in relation to section 11, pre-motion clarification on page 114. I'd like to move an amendment to the recommendation that in relation to this particular item, that where the words pre-motion clarification are mentioned, that the additional words and discussion be added on page 114.
Mr Mayor, I would go back to the definitions at the back of what pre-clarification defines. It's the means and the actions of or process of seeking information, refining the content of the report, including attachments as before, in order to clarify substantive matter for council for resolution.
It's correct. So I understand the definition. The councillor is proposing a significant change in the intent of this section. Is saying that this should include discussion, which is a matter that we will now. I'm trying to consider whether it's consistent with the expectation of whether it's a reasonable amendment to consider.
You would recall that the original iteration of it was discussion at the time, but to allay any concerns around discussions associated with debate, it was deemed that clarification was a more suitable use of the definition.
I understand that. CEO, do you have any additional comment on this before we consider whether this is a reasonable amendment to proceed with? With the debate of.
I think that you would seek a seconder.
Yep. Well, let's go down the path. Consider it for now. Do we have a seconder for the amendment that I believe we are dealing with? Can we just see some words for this? That in attachment 4, revised standing orders procedure clause 14 on page 6 of 18 of the attachment be amended. I think this is what the councillors asked for. Where the words pre-motion clarification mentioned with the additional words and discussion. That's moved by Councillor Swanborough. Do we have a seconder? In the absence of a seconder, the amendment lapses. Are there further amendments sought by the meeting?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move that all provisions and references in the standing orders and supplementary documents be removed. All provisions in relation, not standing orders, but all references in the standing orders to Merrill minutes. So standing orders, supplementary documents, referring to a Merrill minute, be deleted.
Councillors, again, call for a seconder.
Mayor, I'm delighted to second this one because I would love to hear what Councillor Swanborough has to say.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll contain ourselves. We have a seconder in Councillor McConnell. Therefore, we have a motion. Councillor, you wish to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we've previously heard in our clarifications about this particular issue, it's a bit like, you know, it's an equitable process. If we were to move miscellaneous business where the councillors were then denied the opportunity to, without notice, raise something.
Councillor, point of order. You are making a false statement in support of your motion. It's been made quite clear to you that the same provisions are available for councillors to raise matters. The removal of a heading has not removed the powers of councillors to raise matters. So please, I respect your right to promote a case, but not by the introduction of misleading information. Thank you.
Look, there is matters not provided for, Mayor, but it just takes it off the agenda for the meeting if you don't have a heading in there, and that would be my concern, but I'll continue to speak to the motion. The mayoral minute is similar to miscellaneous business, and all the arguments that we've heard today in relation to miscellaneous business are also applicable to the mayoral minute. It is essentially bringing up business without notice, and whilst that is something, a power that the mayor would have, it's not clear to me that even with the other provisions the CEO has talked about, that it's going to be an easy process or a process without a bumpy ride to actually raise something without a placeholder authorising discussion of miscellaneous business. And so for the very fact, I think that's why the standard procedures from the state have recommended that mayoral minutes be deleted, and it's why other councils are no longer allowing mayoral minutes, because it's a more equitable process. It shouldn't be that just one councillor out of 7 has the ability to raise issues lawfully and easily with a placeholder on the agenda, and then the other elected councils have to go through another process to do that, presumably. So, I mean, that's the reason why I think that all those reasons which are advanced by the officers of council in relation to removal of miscellaneous business also apply to the mayoral minute process.
Speaker, anyone wishing to speak against the amendment? Anyone wishing to speak additionally to the amendment? Put the motion. Therefore, those in favour of the amendment as tabled, those in favour? Those against? The amendment is defeated.
And a division on that, please, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Swanborough has asked for a division. Division 1 in favour. Division 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and Mayor against. Are there further amendments that the table wishes to bring forward?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, on page 132 of the report.
Continue, Councillor, yes.
Sorry, I'm in the wrong page here. One moment. Item 7.1. It reads that council must be consistent with the local government principle of transparent and accountable decision making in the public interest by dealing with suspected inappropriate conduct in an open meeting of the council. I move that the words after the words council to the end of the paragraph be deleted and the following words be inserted. Council can consider whether to go into closed session, giving weight to section 254J3 of the Act. I think it's the right section. Uh, 254J3 is the applicable section, that's correct. I might change the word weight to consideration of. Weight 2, delete weight 2 to consideration of section 254J3. And I think that's a regulation, or is it the Act? I'll just have to check.
It's the regulation.
Yes, of the local government regulations, yeah.
Question, Mayor, to Councillor Swanberg. Could you just read out section, or someone read out 254J3, please, so we know what we're...
I'm happy to provide that, Councillor. 254J reference to closed meetings.
Sorry, 254J or 254J3?
254J is a title, closed meetings. 2543 is, however, a local government or committee of a local government may make a resolution about a local government meeting. 254J. However, that's well, I'm just reading now. 254J3. Is that what? About a local government meeting under subsection 1 or 2, only if its councils or members consider it necessary to close the meeting to discuss one or more of the following matters. A, the appointment, discipline or dismissal of a chief executive officer. B, industrial matters affecting employees. C, the local government's budget. D, rating concessions. E, legal advice obtained by local government or legal proceedings involving the local government, including, for example, legal proceedings that may be taken by or against the local government. F, matters that directly affect the health and safety of an individual or group of individuals. G, negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interest of the local government. H, negotiations relating to the taking of land by the local government under the Acquisitions of Land Act 1967. And I, a matter the local government is required to keep confidential under a law or formal arrangement with the Commonwealth or state.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we can add after 3 sub-provision F, matters that directly affect the health and safety of an individual, a group of individuals. For clarity, we don't want to have to consider the whole thing.
Mr. Mayor, I thought the original discussions pertained to the sentence after what Councillor Swamber raised there. It's where following after the full stop of council, it referred to, however, where the complainant or other parties may be adversely affected due to the nature of the complaint, the council may resolve to go into closed session. The point of contention previously was the word adversely, and there was discussions around referring that directly back to 254JF around the health and wellbeing. If that's what
I'm happy with the wording on the screen. Thank you.
And sorry, just for point of clarity, following that sentence after that full stop goes, so that should be
the original. I understood the councillor said the original sentence starting with however at the end of 7.1 will be removed.
Will be removed.
So the last sentence in 7.1 is the proposal is to replace that. Just highlight that for now. Righto. Okay. But that last sentence of 7.1 is proposed to be replaced, is my understanding.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
So we need a, we don't have a second yet, councillor. So, question for information, yes? Yep. Question by.
Right, okay. Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to Councillor Swanborough. In that amendment, would he consider adding that the words that refer to that section, F, in the amendment? So that phrase that refers
to put it actually in there for ease of reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Clarification. Yeah. The consideration could have been following meeting or including that thing where, however, where the complaint or other parties' health and safety may be adversely affected due to the nature of the complaint, the council may resolve to go in closed session.
Sorry?
No, but that it uses the terminology health and wellbeing.
Yeah.
Keeping it to the legislation.
Sorry, no, I'll just keep running out of numbers. The health, that wording would be different to what we need to take the wording as it is there from the legislation if we're taking that in there.
It would seem to me, Mr. Mayor, the easiest way would be to replace the wording with the words that are in the model.
That's pretty clear, I think, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's pretty clear as it's on the screen at the moment.
Any further
just a question
for clarification before we see?
Is it possible to see the wording from the model, the best practice, just to see the difference in the intent? Is that
there's the wording. There it is there, 24.1.
Yes. Yes.
That only deals with the complainant though, doesn't it? Where we actually had complainant or other parties. So we've actually expanded on that to include anyone within the issue, which I think is a better option than just the complainant. And health and safety is very, I think, restrictive, where adversely affected is very broad-based.
Yeah, I think that's quite contained, health and safety. Okay. Any further clarifications? We have a draft, a proposed amendment proposed by Councillor Swanborough. We seek a seconder, Councillor McGuinness. Just wait till the screen catches up. Okay. Councillor, you wish to speak to your amendment?
No, I think it's self-explanatory, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anyone wishing to speak against the amendment? Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. Due to the point we've just raised about capturing the complainant and other parties in the section that was removed, the amendment doesn't capture the complainant and other parties as it stands.
Well, do you want me to comment or not?
It's not appropriate to comment. You're speaking against the amendment, Councillor?
That's correct, Mayor.
Anyone else wishing to speak for the motion, for the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, I think that's...
Sorry, Councillor.
Someone else did.
Sorry, I asked, you've already spoken to your motion, to your amendment. So anyone else wishing to speak to the motion, to the amendment?
Yes, I'd like to speak, please, Mr. Mayor. I think by restricting it to just the complainant, we've made it too restrictive. By using the words directly affect the health and safety, we've made it restrictive. We've made it very broad-based, or what is written there by the council officer in 7.1 has made it very broad-based to include not only health and safety, but it could be the financial implications. It's a very broad-based issue that encompasses everything rather than being very specifics. And I think to move it to what is in the regulation and directly only the health and safety of the complainant or the individual, I think it's just too restrictive. I liked it the way it was. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else seeking leave to speak? Councillor McGuinness.
Yes, Mayor, I think the words are reasonable there. An individual, and that individual can be anyone. It can be the complainant, it can be anyone whatsoever. And health and safety is a very broad range where people are affected in just so many different ways. I think it actually picks up on all those things. And no doubt it was mulled over in the model rules and from the government, and I think those words actually do cover what we're looking for.
Okay. Don't give the amendee. So, anyone else wishing to speak? If not, councillors, we have a proposed amendment. Those in favour?
Do you want me, Mr. Mayor, to...
Well, I'm not sure you actually get the right to close out on an amendment normally. No. So, those in favour? Those against? So the amendment is defeated as tabled. So are there further amendments to be tabled? If not...
Sorry, should we have a division on that one, Mr. Mayor, so everyone can be aware?
was asking, someone's called for a division.
Yep, please.
So the division is those in favour of the amendment, division 1, 5 and 6. Those against the amendment, 2, 3, 4 and the Mayor. Are there further amendments that we wish to table for consideration before we move back to the original motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that in the standing orders that miscellaneous business be included as a placeholder on the order of business. Perhaps we need to word that a bit more broadly. Recommended that in the move, that it should be a moved, is it attachment 4? I don't think it's attachment 4, is it?
It will be in 4. So I have a proposal an amendment proposed by Councillor Swamborough on page 111 of your reports, Councillor, page 110, 111. It runs over the page just for your context to where that's proposed to add at the end of 4.3, which would be after confidential matters. Would be where it would sit in terms of what's in your papers, and this is the proposed amendment to include the heading miscellaneous business. Righto. Thank you for the clarification. It would go between business of the meeting, consideration of business of the meeting, confidential matters, where it to be included. Now, any additional information required, councillors?
If I may, can I just get a definition of the consideration of business of the meeting?
It was briefly raised by the CEO before about any matters that could potentially be utilised in that space.
So is it only restricted to what is itemised within the agenda?
Yes.
So if I needed something brought up, I could just move a motion within the appropriate time to the CEO and it would be included in there.
With those provisions that were raised before,
Yeah.
1.3 and 27
Yeah, cool.
in the current standing orders.
So if I had some business, I could just do the appropriate procedure and send it to the CEO and it'll get included.
As a notice of motion.
Yeah.
Or otherwise in those provisions under 1.3 and 27 that were raised before.
Yeah. Oh, cool. That's all I thought. No, it's just, sorry, just need to clarify that.
And just clarification on what is the timeframes in relation to raising a notice of motion?
I can provide that. I've got on page 128 of our reports, the agendas for meetings, item 3.1, which talks to the matters to go onto an agenda. Item D refers to each item which has been requested to be included by a councillor by providing notice in writing at least 5 business days before the meeting, containing sufficient information of the nature of the business to the Chief Executive Officer. Does that answer the additional information request? So that's in the attachment 5, I believe.
Just a clarification from the CEO. There needs to be sufficient notice, doesn't there, before the agenda is prepared for that to be on the agenda?
That's correct. A notice of motion would appear on the agenda for council's consideration. So hence the amount of business days required beforehand.
So can we...
Just a clarification on that answer. In writing at least 5 business days before the meeting, how many business days does the agenda go out before the meeting?
The attachment standing orders procedure outlines that, and that was discussed in depth. Item 3, notice of meetings and agendas for councillors. 3.1, notice of each ordinary meeting or adjourned ordinary meeting will be given 2 days before the day of the meeting. With reference, organisation resident will aim to give 4 or more days notice before the meeting to assist councillors in their preparation. 3.2, the agenda and any associated reports must be published on council's website by 5 p.m. the next business day following the notice to councillors, and all efforts will be made to publish the agenda and associated reports to the public immediately following release to the councillors, excluding confidential reports.
So just as, if I can ask the CEO on a practical point of view, we have a meeting on a Tuesday now. What's the latest time you would need a notice of motion given to you to get on the agenda?
By the evening of the prior Monday.
So it's really 7 days.
Business days, councillor. Business days.
Yep.
That's not 7 business days. So we have, can we go back to pull away all these screens? And we have a proposed amendment proposed by Councillor Swanborough. We now move to, do we have a seconder for this proposed amendment? In the absence of a seconder, the amendment lapses. We now move to the, back to, are there any further amendments councillors wish to bring regarding this matter? If not, we'll move back to the original motion. Just as we scroll up.
No.
No, no, I don't think there were any amendments adopted. So we now return to the original motion, which was moved by Councillor McGuinness and seconded by Councillor Enright. Councillor McGuinness, do you wish to speak to the recommendation at this time?
No.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor Swanborough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, a series of amendments were proposed. Some of them perhaps are optional, but you know, in relation to one particular amendment which was proposed and defeated, I can say to you and to the councillors that what we are about to approve is ultra vires and against the law. And I give you that advice based on a written advice I have from the Director General of Local Government. I didn't get a chance to present that because I thought I was going to speak against the motion, but that provision to say that you can consider something that's adversely affected broadens the provisions of the local government regulations enormously, and it is not provided for in the regulations, and it's ultra vires. So it means that we're about to, you know, you need to understand that that provision may not stand in law.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak. I think it's been a good process. We started off at the last council meeting, spending about an hour going through it before we realised that we needed to have a separate meeting where we went through 3 hours, line by line, going through all this. Well, some of us did, with the exception of Councillor Swanborough, who didn't really participate.
Councillor, just be cautious about respecting the chamber.
Okay. Which has then brought us into another 2 hours in this one. The thing I do like is that the public do get to hear the discussions that we have in making policy. And I think what we've come up with here after what's nearly 6 hours of discussion has been a good conclusion to some robust discussion. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone else wishing to seek a leave to speak additionally? I will speak briefly in addition. The regular reiteration of standing orders, which has been constant since the pre-amalgamation, but certainly since 2016 with the various legislative changes, has required constant alertness. And I think the overriding provision that the community can always take comfort from is that whilst these standing orders can never prevail over the legislative requirement that is in place for council. So where there is any inconsistency, we will always be beholden to the legislative reference. There are points in some of the model standing orders which cause frustration for all of us to be trying to work out how to execute them, not least of trying to chair a meeting and maintain a semblance of order and good process. And they will continue to evolve, same as our standing orders need to continue to evolve. And I think maintaining some of the additional elements, such as the clarification opportunity before we move into the management of emotion, has allowed for better understanding of the facts and matters before we seek to make decisions, which I think is absolutely paramount for us on behalf of the community. And I think we'll continue to have amendments and corrections and adaptations, because I don't think the legislative environment's stopped changing. But we are at a place where we can move forward with these and have improved practices for the future. Okay, anyone else wishing to seek leave to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor, do you wish to close this?
Yeah, just briefly, Mayor, I think it's, as Councillor McConnell pointed out, we have spent a lot of time on this, and there's been some good points raised in our discussion and workshop, and while not agreeing 100% on every small item, I think it's a good way forward, and I commend the motion to the rest of the councillors. Okay, we now put the motion. Those in favour of the adoption in its all many parts? Those against? Motion's carried. Councillor Swanborough has asked for a division. Those in favour, Division 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and the Mayor. Those against, Division 1. Councillors, that brings me to the close of the business that we have available before the meeting today. Thank you for your diligence and patience working through some of these matters that sometimes can seem quite tedious. Thank you to those in the gallery for bearing with us. We continue to work to ensure good understanding and transparency in our decision making. Thank you to the officers for your diligent preparations, and I will draw the meeting to a close at 12:42 on my clock. Thank you and good day.